If you're a photographer that likes to travel, you've probably been met with this dilemma. How much photography gear do you really need to bring? I just got back from a trip and I decided I was going to take one camera and one lens. But which lens did I bring? That's what I'm going to talk about coming up. One lens photography for travel. I'm Terry Vanderheide, professional photographer. I was headed to some popular travel destinations and I wanted to really pare down all the gear that I was carrying. So I brought only one camera body and one lens. The lens I chose was the new Nikon 35mm f1.2. Now, before I get into why I picked the 35-1.2, I'd love to hear your take. If you could only take one lens with you for travel, what would you choose? Drop your answer in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you all are saying. And while you're there, hit the like button and then maybe subscribe if you like to hear more things like this on my channel and be reminded of my next video by clicking that little bell icon. Actually, next time I'm going to be coming with a video about what's in my bag for travel, for one lens travel, and you're going to want to check that out. Now, here's my one lens for travel thought process and a bit about this new Nikon lens. The 35-1.2 is a fairly new addition to Nikon's lens lineup. I find it extremely versatile. It weighs in at 1.1 kilograms or 2.4 pounds. And when paired with my Nikon Z9 with the bracket and the strap, the whole kit comes in at 2.7 kilograms or a little over 6 pounds. So you could make this kit a little bit lighter by pairing it with, say, a Z8 or a smaller body. But I have Z9s, so that's what I went with. The lens itself costs $2,800, which is in line with most of their fast prime lenses. Now, it might be more than what most people want to spend for a lens. However, keep in mind, a good quality lens purchase will last many years. I'll likely have this lens attached to many different camera bodies over its lifespan. So it comes in kind of heavy and somewhat expensive, but I think it's pretty manageable for travel. Now, when photographers get asked what one lens would you bring for travel, a lot of people would probably just reflexively say a zoom lens. And that kind of makes sense. But for travel, I asked myself, do I really need a zoom lens? Now, I wasn't planning on shooting any wildlife photography, so my longer lenses stayed home. Instead, I was planning to shoot travel scenes, landscapes, and people. I didn't think I needed a zoom lens for that. So why did I go with a prime lens instead of a zoom? Now let's think about for a second what a zoom lens really does. It allows you to stay in one spot and change your framing by rotating the zoom ring. But if you really break it down, most of the time a zoom lens simply saves you a few steps. With a fixed focal length lens, you can accomplish the same thing by moving forward or backward to adjust your composition. To illustrate this, here's an example. Let's say I want to frame something like I would with a 24mm lens with my 35mm lens. The difference is only 6.5 feet, which means I'd have to step back just 2 or 3 steps to achieve the same framing. Sure, now it's not going to work on every situation, but for travel photography, especially when you're exploring cities or markets or landscapes, it works just fine. Now, there are definitely some benefits for using a prime lens over a zoom lens. And in most cases, I find that a top quality prime lens tends to be a bit sharper than a zoom lens. Now, that's not always true across the board, but having that extra edge and sharpness is worth it to me. However, by far the biggest advantage, in my opinion, is the wider aperture. With an f1.2 lens, I can shoot in lower light conditions without having to boost my ISO. More importantly, I can achieve a beautifully shallow depth of field, which opens up a lot of creative possibilities for storytelling and especially for my portrait work. I think of the 35 f1.2 as a storytelling lens. It gives you a wide enough view to capture gorgeous scenes, which is ideal for travel photography, while still allowing you to isolate your subject with that stunning shallow depth of field when shooting wide open at f1.2. Now, back when I started in photography, camera kits were usually sold with a body, a telephoto lens, and what they called a normal lens. That lens was always a 50mm lens. The theory at the time was that if you look through a 50mm lens, you got a normal field of view. The reality was a 50mm lens was too much of a telephoto to be considered normal field of view. Your normal field of view, which you see when you're looking with both eyes, is closer to a 35mm format. It's wide enough to capture the view that you're looking at, but not get distorted like you might get with a 14, 20, or a 24mm lens. So the 35mm focal length turns out to be a pretty versatile format for a lens. Now, I recently took this lens with me to 3 popular tourist destinations: Yosemite National Park, the country of Ireland, and the city of San Francisco. Now, let me show you a few of my captures. Now, in Yosemite Valley, using just one lens can present some challenges, the most obvious being that sometimes it's not quite wide enough. But I have a workaround for that. So let me show you what I'm talking about.
All right, we're at Yosemite Valley and we're taking a few shots. I'm down here by the Merced River. We got El Capitan in the background. We're starting to get some clouds in, which should look pretty cool. So what I want to do today is I'm just working with the 35mm lens, right? Prime lens, there's no zoom to it. You got to find a spot that you like. And in this shot, if I point it up here and take a look at this scene, it looks really good, but it's not quite wide enough. So for me to get a wider shot, I'd have to bring another lens, but I'm bound and determined to get all my shots with one lens here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a panoramic. So I usually lock it onto a tripod. And then I try to level it as best as possible. There's a little bubble level here, and I can level this so I can see exactly what it is that I'm getting. I always turn the camera on manual because I want the exposure to be the same across this. I don't want it on auto exposure because this over here might be a little lighter than over here. And so I want it to all be the same exposure. I'll deal with it all in Lightroom. So I'll pick an exposure here that I like. And so we're at f16 ISO 100, and we're going to shoot in about a 30th of a second. So that's going to get a little bit of movement in this faster water, but also the ability to soften a little bit on that waterfall, Bridal Veil Fall over there. So let me go ahead and position this. And all I'm going to do is take pictures along this axis, right? So we're going to go ahead and keep this level. And I have a leveling base here, which makes life a little easier on this tripod. And then I'll level the ball up here. So I'm pretty level to the whole shot that I'm doing. So now what I'm going to do is just take a look and see what I got. Got enough coverage on the water and the mountains. I like everything. So now what I'm going to do is take a shot. So since I'm at a 30th of a second, I don't want to be pressing the button here. I have it on self-timer. I have it set up for 2 seconds as self-timer. So the very first shot that I'm going to do is a shot of my hand, and the little green light comes on. Probably see the little green light. That means it's going to pause for 2 seconds before it fires. That way I can remove my hand away from everything. But the shot of the hand is to help me later in Lightroom to find exactly where these images are. They're going to be in between 2 hands. I know that's a series. So let's go ahead and start. We'll do a shot. Stand away from the camera, let it do its thing. When it's done, I'm going to just move it and overlap by about a third. Overlap by about a third so I can see exactly what this looks like. And it'll merge together really good. So Lightroom is really good at merging these panoramics. And if you do your shooting right to begin with, it's a pretty easy procedure. You just move. I go about a third overlap, and just more pictures the merrier, doesn't really matter. So now I'm getting the foreground, I'm getting the water, I'm getting the tree that's out in the middle of the water, and I'm also getting all the mountains in the background. Now we're coming up to Bridal Veil Fall. We're getting that in part of the shot, so I include that in the shot. And I know where that is here, so I'm going to probably move just enough to keep that in and do another shot, pull away. And this is probably the max that I want to go, but I'm just going to do one more just to make sure I have it. just in case I want a wider image by the time this thing is done, right? So if a wider image is going to be something that, you know, I can put on the wall. It's going to be huge because this 47 megapixels multiplied by how many pictures, it's going to be a huge file by the time it's done. So let's go one more and then we'll call it. So I don't use auto color on this kind of thing. When you're ever doing a panoramic, you have to make sure to set a color. You know, use cloudy, use daylight, whatever. This happens to be on daylight. You can always adjust the color later. But if each one of these is an auto color and they're different, they're slightly different based on maybe this direction is showing a lot of green, so the camera's going to add a little yellow to it. They'll all be different colors, and that's not going to work. So in a panoramic, you want to have your exposure exactly the same, your color balance exactly the same. So when you go through, all the color and everything looks the same. And then from there, we're going to make that image, and I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll end up merging it all together to make one full image. So now the very last thing that I do is I take another great picture of my hand, so that now that I have in between those two hand pictures is going to be all my panoramic shots. That's how you do it. That's how you make a 35mm, which is an awesome format for a lens, how you make it into a much wider lens if you need to. And obviously if you need a closer up lens, then you work with a high megapixel camera and you can crop a little bit to get a little bit closer. But in my case, it's usually, you'll see that a 35mm lens actually is a really nice view. It's kind of the normal eye view, and you're going to see it's a really nice view to be able to take your images with. But if it's not wide enough, put it vertically, make a panoramic.
When I was shooting in Ireland, it was really nice to only have one lens to think about, rather than haul around my whole kit. The 35mm focal length turned out to be incredibly versatile for almost everything I wanted to shoot. However, where it really shined was when I wanted to use that shallow depth of field to isolate a person or an object. It's perfect for street photography, where you want to tell a story, but still draw the viewer in right to your subject. While shooting in iconic San Francisco, the single lens on the camera made moving around faster and safer. It eliminated that theft target that you can get on yourself when you're in a big city if you're carrying around a multi-lens camera bag. A single lens can serve you beautifully as a primary landscape lens and an ideal tool for capturing people in their environment. And honestly, using just one lens made me much more intentional about my compositions. Now try it before you travel sometime. I think it's a great exercise for any photographer to use one lens and go out shooting for a day. Once again, if you had to pick just one lens for travel, what would you bring? Let me know in the comments. All right, I'll see you next time.